Hello to everyone. In this lesson, we are going to talk about hydraulic power steering system. And sometimes it will be called HPS during the lesson. At the beginning of this lesson, I would like to talk about history of HPS quickly. The father of this system is Francis Davis. He used this system in an automobile in 1926. Chrysler Imperial 1951 is the first commercial passenger car that used HPS unit in history. After Chrysler's revolution, many other car manufacturers such as General Motors, Honda, and Toyota implemented their own variation of this system. And that brings us where we are now. Before explaining hydraulic power steering system, I think we must talk about basic steering system to understand HPS better. First of all, let's define steering. Steering is the term applied to the collection of components, linkages, etc., which will allow a vehicle to follow the desired course. If we simplify this system, these components are steering wheel, number 1, steering column, number 2, and steering rack, number 3. Let's start with something we are all familiar with, the steering wheel, number 1. This part needs no introduction actually. It is the circular object that we always hold and turns when driving. The steering wheel is responsible for taking our steering input, while the rest of the steering system responds accordingly this input to change the car's trajectory. Second is steering column. Steering column is a solid metal shaft that transfers your steering effort from the steering wheel to the steering rack. And number 3, steering rack. Steering rack is essentially an enclosed metal casing with rack and pinion gears. You can see on that photo also. And this rack and pinion gears inside of this gearbox. It is connected to the steering column. It has to convert rotational motion to the lateral motion, so linear motion. And it makes steering easier through gear reduction. Types of steering systems. There are many different types of car steering system. Some runs purely on mechanical, some runs on hydraulic, some runs on electric, and some runs on both. We call it hybrid, but today's topic is hydraulic power steering system. We are not going to talk about other systems. A hydraulic power steering system works very similarly to non-power assisted steering rack, which we talked before. The hydraulic power steering system is a closed loop that uses pressurized hydraulic fluids for changing the wheel angle of front wheels based on steering angle. It contains a hydraulic pump driven by a belt, valves, cylinder, reservoir, and a driver control mechanism. This mechanism includes rack and pinion and steering gearboxes. If we take a look at photo, we can see elements of hydraulic power steering system. The most important parts of these systems are pump assembly, column shaft, as we talked before, high rod assembly, it is connected to the box assembly, gearbox assembly, and of course steering wheel. Hydraulic power steering have a few additional parts to supply the extra power. We are talking about hydraulic fluid, steering fluid reservoir, steering pump, rotary valve, and hydraulic chamber. Hydraulic fluid. Hydraulic fluid or hydraulic liquid is the medium by which power is transferred in hydraulic machinery. Common hydraulic fluids are based on mineral oil. Power steering fluid is a subtype of hydraulic fluid. Most are mineral oil or silicon-based fluids. While some use automatic transmission fluid made from synthetic base oil. Attention! Use of the wrong type of fluid can lead to failure of the power steering pump. Steering fluid reservoir. I think this word is French. It's like tank. It holds the fluid and supplies them to the steering pump through rubber hoses. This tank is shown on a curve. Steering pump. You can find the steering pump attached to the car engine, usually right next to the alternator and AC compressor. We connect the steering pump to the engine through a belt pulley mechanism using an engine belt. When car's engine is running, the engine belt turns in a loop and that also turns to the steering pump. With that, the pump pulls the steering fluid from the steering fluid reservoir and pressurize them. We put low pressure steering fluid in and high pressure steering fluid comes out of the other end. This high pressure steering fluid then leaves to the steering pump through the steering hoses and into the steering rack, especially into the rotary valve. Rotary valve. A rotary valve is a highly sensitive metal casing with strategically placed holes and holes that redirects the steering fluid either back to the steering pump or into the steering rack. Think of it as the traffic police at a busy road intersection. It tells the steering fluid which way to go depending on where you turn your steering wheel. If the steering wheel is in its original position, the rotary valve redirects the steering fluid back to the steering pump and nothing happens. So, if we don't turn steering wheel, nothing will happen. The cycle of steering fluid moving from reservoir to pump and the rotary valve just keeps repeating itself. But when the driver turns the steering wheel, the rotary valve opens up and the steering fluid from the steering pump gets redirected. This time, it doesn't go back to the steering pump, but it exits the rotary valve through the fluid lines and into one of the hydraulic chamber of the steering rack. And last one, hydraulic chamber. In the hydraulic chamber, there is a hydraulic piston right down the middle, as we can see on the photo. It separates the hydraulic chamber into two equal portions, right and left side and right side. The steering fluid gets redirected into these two chambers, but here is the twist. They don't get equal amounts of steering fluid, and that's how works this system. When there is more steering fluid on one side of the hydraulic chamber, it creates a pressure differential across the chamber. So from left side and right side, there will be always pressure differential. The steering fluid then pushed the hydraulic piston towards the weaker side of the hydraulic chamber, and the steering rack moves accordingly. And after that, of course, our wheels will be moved by driver. Thanks for watching.